God, I broke the table already. Fuck. Oh God. Well, I guess it's better that I break my equipment than your equipment, Caleb.
Oh no, this is just a table. It's a $40 Walmart table. Not worried about it.
Fucking love Walmart. Walmart is also a big part of American culture, I think.
Unfortunately, that's a really broad representation.
There is nothing wrong with Walmart. Walmart is like my mecca.
Well, you go to Walmart in Santa Monica, so it's a little different than Walmart out here.
No, I don't. There is definitely no Walmart in Santa Monica. It's kind of lame. Whenever we go up to the desert, I get Danny to just drop me at Walmart, and I'm like, leave me for 2 hours. This is my church. I love it. There's nowhere like it in Britain, so it's like a...
Yeah, it's somewhere you can see a lot of interesting characters, both inside and outside. It's kind of interesting, especially the one that I usually go to.
Oh, God, I was going to say the one that I used to go to a lot was on the drive between Yucca Valley and Joshua Tree.
Okay.
And the one time I took one of my girlfriends up there, and she's so stunningly beautiful. Like, oh my, just, you know... If I was that way inclined, she'd be like the ultimate woman kind of thing. And we went into the restroom, used it, came out, and as we were like washing our hands, we like went to kind of like turn to leave, and we turned, and there's this woman, and her hair is out here, just like wild gray hair. She has no teeth, and she's just like, "Are you guys models?" And we were just like, "Oh, actually, yeah, sometimes technically we are." And she was like, "Oh, okay. It's so lovely to meet you." And then she just walked away, and I was just like, see, only in Walmart.
Yeah, that's actually a very Walmart story.
Yeah.
By the way, we're live.
Oh, cool.
We are live. Well, I think you can buy guns in Walmart, right? I feel like that's a thing.
In some states, yes. In California, unfortunately, no. And for a while after, I think, one of the shootings a couple years back, actually Walmart decided to pull ammunition from most of their stores, at least the handgun ammunition. They still provide like hunting ammunition for stores in some states, but I think outright in California, it's they pulled it completely. Right. So, but that used to be the spot to buy cheap ammunition. Right. So
that and Big Five, right?
Big Five's still doing it, and Big Five actually kind of sharing a little secret with all the listeners here. But Big Five actually has the better prices because their contracts locked in from so far when their the pricing is locked in there, so they're still able to provide ammunition at prices pre-COVID, pre-crisis, and all that. So it's a little hidden secret that now the cat's out of the bag. Right.
That's great. Yeah. No, it's we're gonna have to hit up Big Five and be like, can we get 1% of those sales in sponsor revenue, please? We'll talk about it all the time. Right. I'm gonna go hit up all the execs on like LinkedIn after this. Yeah. Right. But
by the way, thank you for the range time.
Absolutely.
And the lesson. That was amazing.
Yeah, like I was telling you guys, my biggest thing, the reason why I stepped into kind of this role and kind of starting this company as well is I'm a huge advocate for the Second Amendment, and as a result, I want to be a positive influence in this community to be able to spread not only safety but effective use and just things for people to think about, because firearms in general are inherently, potentially dangerous if used incorrectly. And I was telling you guys, the majority of people that buy guns, they don't seek professional training because they've seen one too many, John Wick movies, right. And it becomes problematic. So for myself, I figured, I'm good at, teaching, so might as well utilize that skill to explain to people how to do things properly, to be, an advocate for this sport, this lifestyle. That way, I'm doing my part to advance the progress for the Second Amendment, because over the last few decades, we've been seeing a decline in our civil rights, our Second Amendment rights. But slowly now we're kind of seeing, a little bit of pushback with a number of various cases, even here in California. California by far has some of the more restrictive gun laws. We're not the most restrictive, but we do have quite a few, pieces of legislation and existing codes in the book that make it relatively restrictive compared to other free states, like we call them, like Arizona, Texas, Nevada, stuff like that. But yeah, we're starting to see a slight shift in mindset, and a lot of people are starting getting more into the sport, especially now with the whole COVID pandemic and all the numerous civil unrest, riots, protests, whatever you want to call them, we're starting to see a lot of people realizing that, hey, the police can't necessarily be there if there's a situation going on. You know, if they're all tied up with riots and whatnot, guess what? The response time, instead of being the typical 5 to 10 minutes for an emergency, something like that, it's closer to, God, who knows, 30 minutes, an hour, never.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are starting to see this and seeing kind of the writing on the wall. So a lot of people are like, oh, you know what? Maybe I should start thinking about arming myself to protect myself.
Right.
Because when you speak to a lot of people, especially here in California, say, oh, why do you need a gun? Just call the police. And now all the talks of defunding the police or this and that, you know, people are starting to realize, oh, crap, maybe the police aren't going to be there. So it's really interesting to see, you know, people from all walks of life. Being here at the range, I'm able to interact with various people from all the way from, you know, Calabasas, California, all the way out to San Diego. They all come out here every so often, and, you know, I get to meet people from, you know, from actors to, you know, stay-at-home moms, single moms, stuff like that. So it's really interesting to see and hear their stories of why they went out and purchased a gun. And it's all the same thing. They're just seeing all the civil unrest, all these, you know, the panic and stuff, and they're realizing that, hey, maybe the police can't be there 24/7. Now I have to take my safety and the protection of my family into my own hands. So it's and because of that, you know, people need to be trained and people need to be effective at what they're doing, and especially if they can bring in a firearm into their own homes. So, you know, that's why I love what I do, to be able to be an advocate for that, to make sure everyone's safe and responsible with their guns.
Yeah. And I mean, the training that we got just like less than an hour ago, it was, well, you talked for about an hour, give or take, walked us through the whole thing, and the analogies that you used in terms of the safety, it terrifies me to think that anyone would have a gun at home and not have gone through at least that, like, introductory level of training. Like, I can't imagine what could go wrong in the wrong hands, but as soon as you get that kind of training, it flips completely 180. And it's weird being out here as an immigrant, because everyone at home, everyone I grew up with, is very anti-gun, and I became very pro Second Amendment within probably weeks of moving here, because again, like, saw the writing on the wall. I was like, oh, okay, like, this is actually quite a corrupt system. Like, we don't live in this kind of utopia. We live still in the Wild West, really. And I don't know, I don't want to speak ill of, like, any kind of law enforcement around here, certainly, especially with everything that's going on. But yeah, their resources are limited, and I think it's almost like, if I had a family at home, I would absolutely keep a gun at home.
Right.
So to hear that that's the norm. And then, so we're out currently in San Bernardino County.
Correct.
Where, what's this area called? I guess it's like the road between, kind of.
So this is kind of the gateway between California and, you know, the rest of the, you know, the eastern part of the country. So it's the base. It's one of the only ways in and out of the state, at least down here in Southern California. So this is the main road that people take along the 15 highway towards Las Vegas and all that stuff. So we do get a lot of traffic through here. We're actually sitting on Old Route 66. It's a historic route that was used back in, you know, late 1800s. Like during, you know, the whole cowboy expansion west era, like, this area was kind of like the spot to funnel people into. And I had a very interesting conversation with some local historians a couple weeks back. We saw them kind of peeping around the property, got to talking to them, and they're like, oh yeah, we're local historians, and they gave me a little bit of a rundown on what they were doing here, what they're trying to do and stuff. So it was really interesting to kind of hear their stories and kind of learn a little bit about this place, because there's just so much history in this specific area. And for me, myself, I love looking back at history, because I subscribe to the notion of, you know, those who dismiss history are doomed to repeat it, right? So I like to keep myself informed, and at the same time, it just interests me. So it's really, really fun.
That's so cool. And I mean, like, this land it's an old ranch, and the way that it's kitted out, like, the listeners at home can go to mine and Danny's social media. You can go and watch the videos online on the YouTube channel. It's really designed for like it's outdoor shooting, which is great because we're in the middle of a bunch of lockdowns that we don't need. So this is like one of the very few like recreational / training activities that we could actually do.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I don't know how the lockdowns are going to affect people's mental health long term. That's a whole lot. Like we'll come back in 6 months and see what other kinds of people are buying guns. But it's the way that it's set up out here, it really takes all the stigma out of guns. Like when I think or thought about a gun range prior to coming here, you think of like building, like buzzers, like the plexiglass, you're just shooting in one direction at like one thing. But what you have out here is, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but it's far more realistic to what it would be like if one was shooting a gun for defensive purposes and for hunting purposes.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So we're sitting on about 90 acres of property. It's one of the larger facilities down here in Southern California. Mm-hmm. And like you said, open air, outdoor range, and all the things that you would need to do to train effectively, you know, working from the holsters, slings, and whatnot. You can't typically do that inside an indoor range,
right?
Because there's a lot of safety and liability issues, especially, like I said, most people don't get formal training. Mm-hmm. But out here, you get your own private bay for the most part. And within your private bay, you're able to train how you would typically want to be able to train, where you're otherwise limited inside an indoor range. But let's see here. We have, 26 individual private bays that we offer to our guests. And they're, like I said, you're able to work from the holster, do all that stuff. That's more conducive to actual defensive training, because standing around shooting at a piece of paper at 10, 15 yards, you're only training one piece of the puzzle. You're just working on marksmanship. You're not thinking about moving and shooting. You're not doing anything like that. So being out here in an outdoor range setting is going to be able to allow you to get to that level of competency that you otherwise wouldn't have in an indoor range.
Well, that must be so. That must be why Ian was so insistent on us meeting. So that's how we came to do the interview today. Was our mutual friend Ian Patterson was like, "You gotta meet Caleb. Like, he's the best with guns that I've ever met." And like, I don't think any of us will ever know what Ian did truly in the military, kind of thing.
He's kind of an enigma in that regard.
Yeah, it's like one of those things where it's like I don't even want to like ask him sometimes. Like I mean, huge shout out to Ian. We'll get him on the show hopefully next time he's in town. Yeah. Brilliant human. How did you meet Ian?
So funny story. So Ian, he's kind of a nomad. He goes from place to place. I think he was in Florida and he was here, obviously abroad during his time in the service, and now he's over in Texas somewhere, and who knows where he's going to be next year. But no, I came to meet Ian a couple years back. I actually started getting into adult recreational hockey, ice hockey, and so it's something that I just started getting into. And you meet, just like out here at the range, you meet people from all walks of life and stuff. And I had a team that I put together. We call ourselves the Trash Pandas, based out of Anaheim, California. But he was actually on an opposing team for a while, and then we got to know him because of his stature, his size, and his ability to just skate through everyone, because no one wants to stand in front of him, because why would you stand in front of a train, right? So eventually his team was asked to kind of restructure because they were a little too good for the division that we play in, which is basically as low as you can go other than the introductory kind of league. We're not going to make the NHL by any means, so let's be realistic. So we just play at the level that we're comfortable with. It's for fun, a little bit of exercise. But he was on the other team, and then they had to restructure because they had one too many players that were a little above the level that would be appropriate for the division we're playing in. And so we recruited him, and he just fit like a perfect piece of the puzzle. He just fit in with the guys, and like with any team sports, it's all about the banter, it's all about the trash talking and stuff and poking fun at each other. So he fit right in, and even now, even though he's out in Texas, we still keep in touch. We actually had him back here a month ago for a little scrimmage that we had with another team. So he flew back here. We got him all kitted up with gear, so he came out and played with us again. So it was a good time.
That was the weekend we were in Utah. We
Oh, was
missed.
it?
Yeah, we missed each other by
Oh.
about 2 hours on either side of that trip.
Mm.
So next time, and then we'll all have to get together, come out here, shoot some guns.
Oh yeah.
We can watch you guys play some hockey,
Yeah.
and then we'll definitely go and get drunk.
Oh, for sure.
Sounds like a plan.
if we can.
Oh yeah,
If we can, we'll see how it goes.
might not be
Yeah.
allowed to. Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, so fun has been banned in California, so hopefully that will see. Well, here you guys have been pretty crazy busy though, by the sounds of things.
You know, it varies because we just got hit with another statewide mandate. You know, Gavin Newsom decided that, hey, you know what, let's shut everything down again, and so they put that order out. I don't know if counties are abiding by it. I think everyone's sick of it at this point, but
Right.
that kind of threw a wrench in the system because people were like, oh crap, are these places open? Do we? So right now the majority of the calls are, hey, are you guys open? Because no one knows, right? But yeah, we did see a little dip after that little announcement was made, but on our weekends, that's when people really come out because unfortunately people still have to work even despite the lockdowns and whatnot.
Right.
So
Yeah. Gosh.
Yeah, it seems like regardless of the COVID situation, you guys are still socially distanced, the range setup.
yeah, totally.
Yeah, so I mean, you can still definitely run.
Oh yeah.
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 And that's part of the beauty of this place in particular. We're in an outdoor setting, and then for the most part, I would say like 90% of our range facility is for individual private use. So you and your own household can come out here. You know, you're not intermingling with other guests. You know,
Right.
you're not standing shoulder to shoulder with them for the most part. So that's all like well within compliance of social distancing. And, you know, we take extra steps to sanitize everything to make sure everything's, you know, clean just in case, you know, for whatever reason there's like any type of risk. We try to mitigate that as much as possible to make our guests feel comfortable.
And I mean, the way that it's set up, and my mother is going to hate me saying this, but it's almost like the best kind of setup for like a kid's birthday party. Like if I had kids and, you know, they were turning 10 or something, I'd be like, why don't you and a bunch of our friends, like, we'll go to the range, like, yeah. And like, you could almost have like snacks on the back end. I mean, like, obviously safety first, guys. Right. But it is set up in such a way that it is a whole day out family activity, or like a group, like, you know,
it's kind of like a carnival.
Yeah.
Right? Booth by booth.
Right. Yeah. You kind of see it that way. So the name of the facility is Route 66 Shooting Sports Park, right? So it's not Route 66 shooting range, because the shooting range implies that you're just there to shoot. There's going to be so much more that we're going to be offering here in the near future. Right now, we just opened up the public side of the range for open and shooting. We just opened up a brand new, you know, clay shooting area for the shotguns and stuff. That just opened up a couple weeks ago, so it's brand new. Not a whole lot of people know about it yet, but it's a lot of fun. Like I don't typically shoot shotgun and clays and stuff, but when we're trying it out, I blew through every single piece of ammunition that we had. So it's a good time. Yeah, but like you said, it's good. It's great for parties. It's outdoors. You know, we often get people with, you know, 10, 15, 20 people even come out here, set up, and then have a little picnic while they're shooting and stuff. Because as you can imagine, you're not going to sit there and shoot for 2 hours straight because it can get physically fatiguing. So.
Oh, yeah. I mean, my upper body strength was, like, I'm embarrassed. Like, I clearly have none. And even just shooting the handguns, I was like, after like 2 or 3 shots, it's like, oh shit, like my elbow started to twinge. And I was just like, I'm fucking useless.
But I think you did pretty well, right?
Yeah, like I said, to you up top, it's you did really well. Especially you're able to hit, you know, a 10 by 12 inch target at roughly 35 yards. Even the 1 or 2 times that you hit it, that's more than most people can do. I'll tell you that much.
Favorite.
Exactly.
Thank you.
That's good.
It looked very natural on you.
It's not beginner's luck. So yeah, it's pure skill.
Thank you, Danny. He's like,
Natural
he's just so good at stroking my ego.
And some people have it, some people don't. You know, sometimes I have to work with students a little more to get them to a place. But some students, you know, they catch on really quick, and I can move them into more advanced stuff. So the way I structure my classes, you know, the company is Adapt Training. That's kind of my own private, you know, third-party instruction that I did. prior to taking on a full-time position here at the range. But it still exists, but I kind of stepped away from it just because it's kind of not necessarily conflict of interest, but I just don't have the time for it. But the way my teaching style is, I like to be very flexible and adaptive to the needs of any given group or any given student, right? So we have anywhere from 65-year-old grandmother who's now getting her snub nose through 38 special, and she doesn't know how to operate it, and you get those types of people, and you get the more younger guys that are a little more high speed, like I want to learn how to shoot fast, I want to be John Wick, whatever, right? So you really have to be able to shift gears and cater to whoever you're talking to kind of bring it down to the level of understanding and to their pace, right? So like I was telling you guys, oftentimes up top is take your own pace. Don't worry about going fast. Go at the pace that you're comfortable with. Then from that point on, speed will gradually come with with experience and knowing how to do things properly.
Right.
So, okay, question. We were talking a lot just about like the technicalities of shooting, and one of the things that you said was most people will close an eye to begin with, but the idea is to get up to a point where you can shoot with both eyes open.
Yeah.
I didn't pull a single, there was not one time that I put my finger on the trigger where I had both eyes open. I was like this the whole time with my head tilted, because it's, I think, far more of a technical sport than I had ever anticipated.
There's a lot of physics involved, a lot of biomechanical functions involved. It's very scientific, right? We're all here in the real world, we're governed by the laws of physics and the limitations of our human bodies and whatnot, and environmental factors. So as a result, we have to be able to understand what's happening biomechanically speaking, and then making adjustments to be more efficient in accurate pistol shooting.
Right, even very, very minor movements, right? Even like you mentioned earlier, how if it doesn't align with this arm, it'll pull to the left.
Exactly, yeah. Even something like being a millimeter off in terms of how you're gripping it or how you're aligning the bore axis relative to your bone structure and stuff like that, that could play a huge difference. Even though you're moving it just a micrometer, a tiny little portion, like it makes a pretty big difference, right?
What do you call it? The cone?
The cone of deviation.
Cone of deviation, yeah. And that, I think, just that logic in and of itself made so much sense. Like, I remember one of our mutual friends once said, like, oh, yeah, you can have someone running towards you and you can point a handgun at them and shoot 10 times and miss them every single time, even if they're 3 feet away. And I mean, I didn't experience that today because I hit the target so well, but but no, I can see how, even like the wind, I'm sure, has at least some kind of minor effect.
Well, for us, because of the distance that we're shooting at, that would have very little effect. The most it would have an effect on is ourselves being cold and being able to, maybe shaking a little bit or trembling. But at that distance, the wind's not going to be much of a factor.
Is that more for like the military style, like the sniper who's up in the hillside behind us? Like,
it's more for long range, extreme long range shooting. Anything beyond like 3 or 4, maybe 500 meters or yards, that's when you start seeing wind being a factor, really.
God, it's so technical.
Yeah. There's a lot of disciplines as far as shooting sports are concerned. You have, the competitive side of things where, we have USPSA, IPSC, and a number of different types of competitive shooting organizations that have their own set of rules. And for the most part, they shoot based off of time and accuracy, right? These are the key performing indexes that everyone's measured against. So that is a very, very specific discipline. But there's so many things that translate across the board. Marksmanship is marksmanship, but the way that you perhaps shoot a stage might be different than a police officer clearing a house, right? You're not going to be going in there checking every single corner at full speed because you're under the timer. If you're by yourself, you're going to be a little more methodical. Checking every corner, making sure everything's safe. Making conscious decisions on your backdrop, and at any time someone could be out there with a gun pointing at you or whatnot, and you have to make that split second. Versus competition, it's a little more controlled, and it's you don't really have to think about that. Although a lot of these shooting sports, they try to make it more practical in approach, so they kind of set things up like as if, for example, oh, you're simulating a hallway. This is a doorway to a bedroom, or even some of the more involved stages. They even have props and stuff. Like for example, you'll be laying in bed, and then you have to wake up and then get your gun out of the drawer and then get up and load it and everything. So it gets pretty nutty.
Wait, so is that the kind of stuff? Do you take part in those kind of competitive?
It's been a while since I've shot competitively. I've never really gotten into it to that degree. My focus and my discipline is mostly defensive use of firearms. There is, like I said, there's a lot of overlap just because moving and shooting is moving and shooting. Marksmanship is marksmanship. It's just how the pace you take it and the mentality behind it, the thinking behind it is a little bit different. But all the technical stuff, for the most part, is fundamentally the same.
God.
Wow. Do you prefer a handgun or do you prefer a rifle, an AR?
So, like I was saying to you guys earlier, a rifle is going to be inherently easier to shoot. You're going to have much more stability because if you have much more contact with the platform itself versus a handgun, which you have 2 points of contact, your right hand and your left hand, right? So, and you have a much smaller sight radius, and that cone of deviation is exacerbated because of that shorter sight radius and barrel length. I personally train a lot with handguns just because that's the most difficult to master. And, you know, for the most part, a lot of what you do with the pistol, you can translate over to a rifle or a shotgun or any other firearm. I prefer the pistol because it's very versatile, right? You can throw it in your waistband, walk around, and then no one knows no one's none the wiser, right? So versus you're not necessarily going to walk into Walmart with a rifle slung across your back, buying, an energy drink or tampons or anything like that, right? So it's a little different, right? So for everyday use, at least in the civilian world, I prefer a pistol because of its versatility, the portability of it, and it doesn't take up a lot of space. But in terms of effectiveness, a long gun is definitely going to be more effective in terms of the energy it delivers, as well as the efficiency and accuracy you inherently get from a longer platform.
What do you find most people purchase when they go and get, say, like a first gun? Like, in your experience, is it mostly handguns? Or is it like, are there gender differences? Are there like,
it really depends on who you're talking to. It's out here, I get to meet so many different people. Recently, California passed legislation where you cannot buy any firearm unless you're 21 years old. So I think that passed a couple years back, or was implemented a couple years back. It was very recent. And regardless, back then, when I first started shooting, you only had to be 18 to buy a long gun, or anything other than a handgun, rather. Right. So for me personally, my first gun was a shotgun that I bought from Big Five. It was $220. It was, it was notorious, a Big Five combo.
What? That's so cheap.
Yeah, you can't get that for that price nowadays.
I was gonna say,
anymore.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and even back then, it was considered on the more expensive side, but it was widely available and it was like easy to get to, and the restrictions back then were not as stringent as it were. I just needed to go in there with the driver's license. They still had the 10-day wait, the background check and all that, but nowadays you need to get your firearm safety certificate. You have to have 2 proofs of residencies, this and that, so it's more hurdles to jump through. But now, because regardless of your rifle or pistol or handgun or long gun, you still have to be 21. That kind of evens the playing field. So you're not going to get those 18-year-olds that can only buy a long gun. Now at that point, when they're 21, they can buy whatever they want. Otherwise, if it's an established, it's a fully grown adult, or 21 plus, I see a lot of people buying handguns just because the misconception that a long gun is going to be harder to handle and stuff like that, and just general availability and just the thinking that a handgun is going to be easier to handle. But in fact, the opposite is true.
The opposite.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. What would you want to own, Kay, for your first a pistol or?
I'm gonna have to find a picture. It's gonna have to be super cute, super small, super pink. No, I think honestly, I like to be good at the most difficult aspect. So I think I would go for a handgun just because what am I gonna own a gun for? I'm gonna own it for playing with it, like places like this, and for defense. So I think I would want to go for a handgun once I get my citizenship. I've always said, like, as soon as I get my citizenship, that's going to be the first thing I go out and get. But again, I would want to be, well, that's why we're going to be coming back as much as possible, because I do want to be fully trained. Like, I think it's pointless and irresponsible to own a gun and not be trained on how to use it to the absolute best of your ability.
Right.
But I don't know, what about you? What's your preference, Danny?
I'm kind of like Caleb here, where I like the difficulty of it. I mean, when I purchased the AR and when it was my first time shooting, I was surprised because I was just hitting everything.
Yeah.
It was just so easy. I was like, oh, I'm a good shooter. No, but I realized no, it's just a gun. And then when I go back to a pistol, I'm fucking all over the place.
No, you would. You were excellent.
But yeah, I prefer to master the more difficult.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, because once you master the most difficult, everything else just
kind of blends in.
Yeah, it's easy at that point.
Right.
You know.
So now that I'm training on COD, should I be training on COD with a handgun as well?
Talking about Call of Duty.
Yeah.
I just got her into Call of Duty.
Oh,
so,
yeah?
Yeah, it's kind of a running joke amongst the episodes now. But it is like, you know, I tried using a handgun to shoot people on Call of Duty and I was like, I fucking suck at this game. And then I go to a rifle and it's just like, oh, I'm amazing. I win at everything.
Right.
And I guess that translates.
I don't think that game translates to real life.
I'm sure it does. It's exactly the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only accurate part is, you know, a rifle is going to be more accurate, more powerful. You know, your stopping power is going to be way up there, and then your pistol is going to be a little more, you know, it's more of a, if you're talking about like war fighting, for example, you know, a rifle, a long gun platform is always going to be your best bet because of how effective it is, right? But for everyday civilian life, you know, I carry a Glock 19 with me everywhere I go, you know, permitted to carry. I'm not going to be carrying my AR everywhere I go. That's just not practical, right? And I can't necessarily fit it down my pants. So it's the portability issue. And then just in general, if you have a concealed carry permit, typically it's for handguns only for the most part. In most states, that's how it is. But yeah, the versatility of having a handgun versus a rifle. But it's still nice to be able to have a rifle and be able to be effective with it, just in case, you know, it gets to the point where you have to actually use a rifle to that extent. But for everyday use, like that's why I like to train with my pistols so often, just so it's more applicable to my lifestyle because
more
I'm not
practical.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Can you talk about that again? I know you mentioned earlier about the concealed carry in California, but
yeah. So it's 10 years ago, or about 10 years ago, if you were to tell me that I would be able to get my concealed carry license here, I would just laugh at you. And in some places, it's still basically impossible. However, it's really interesting to see within the last decade or so, we're starting to see more and more. Actually, more recent than that, within the last 2 to 3 to 4 years, we're seeing a lot more instances where county sheriffs are more lenient in granting concealed carry permits. So out here in Riverside County, our sheriff, Chad Bianco, he was recently elected, I believe 2 years ago, and he completely revamped the CCW unit. He added additional personnel, additional resources, opened up a whole other office to serve the east side of the county as well. So he's really the ideal constitutionalist sheriff that I hope that every single county can have.
I was about to say, I just saw one of the PSAs that he put out against Gavin Newsom. I got sent it probably by about 150 different people. And that's like a slow day on the Instagrams. And I thought what he said to Gavin Newsom in regards to the new lockdowns, I was like, God, the world would be a much better place if all men were like this.
Yeah.
that's the video we saw together.
Yeah. I was so impressed. I was so impressed. And I think that that's something that, I mean, I would assume that that's the norm in the rest of the country. Like, how does conceal and carry work? Is it just like normalized in the rest of the states? Sorry,
so
technical difficulties.
Yeah, there are a few states that are very much like California, where gun laws are extremely restrictive. More left-leaning progressive states tend to have some pretty hefty or pretty difficult gun laws and pretty restrictive gun laws. Typically, it's the coastal elite. We have the East Coast, New York, New Jersey, and here on the West Side, you have places like California where all of our gun laws are extremely restrictive. So everywhere else, even, for example, there's a rise in states that are moving towards what we call constitutional carry, which means the Constitution is your carry permit, which means you don't even need to apply for a permit. If you are legally able to possess a firearm, you can carry that firearm concealed or otherwise, and it's not against the law. So places like Arizona, Alaska, and there's probably a few more out there. There's probably, I think, maybe close to 10 to a dozen states that are kind of moving towards that direction, where you don't even need to have a carry permit, just carry, right? So I believe it's like the way the political spectrum works is it's weird, right? It kind of swings in one direction and then it swings back to the other direction, right? We kind of see this little swinging action. So now, because we've been dealing with all these, quote, like progressive policies and whatnot, people are starting to see the struggles that we have with it, and a lot of people, center are now kind of swinging back towards the right, swinging back towards more conservative leanings and whatnot, and the Second Amendment being one of those things, right? So we're starting to see a slight shift in change as it relates to the Second Amendment. Even here in California, like I was saying before, there's a bunch of lawsuits and legislation and court rulings in our favor, and ours meaning the Second Amendment community. Sorry, the American people.
I was about to say, yeah, the patriots.
Yeah, so it's starting. I'm starting to see it kind of shift even in the last decade. Like I said, 10 years ago, I would have never thought I would be able to get a concealed carry permit here in California, but because of patriots like Chad Bianco, also the San Bernardino County Sheriff John McMahon, they're starting to open up doors to allow citizens to be able to get their concealed carry permit to be able to protect themselves, because they realize they're not going to be there 24/7, right? When there's a saying within the gun community, when seconds count, when seconds matter, the police are minutes away, right? So,
right. Yeah. I mean, I've had that experience personally.
right.
Kay knows about this. Yeah, in downtown. It was about 10 years ago where I was going for a job interview, and this guy came at me with a knife trying to rob me.
Oh, Christ.
And he attacked me and cut me up, and I was bleeding out my hands, and he got me really deep, so like my blood was pulsating.
Right.
It took them 30 minutes to come. Luckily the person that was interviewing me called the cops for me. But yeah, it took a while.
And that's in downtown Los Angeles, where there should be a cop on every single street corner because of how, downtown Los Angeles is only Skid Row now. It's just all Skid Row.
It's just, everywhere. It's a giant homeless encampment nowadays. It's pretty sad to see.
Right. That's pretty much LA right now. And what's scary is that, like, even during the riots, things like that, when you're in a city that big, they say there's only 10 million people. It's more like 50. Sorry, I keep breaking this. I'm terrible. And what really freaked me out was the fact that, a lot of my neighbors probably do own guns and I don't. Are they going to come and rob me if the electricity goes off and the power goes, or the water goes out? And that was a very daunting realization, again, as an immigrant, to kind of go, oh shit, okay, I live somewhere that is completely in the polar opposite direction of where I've come from,
right?
And it could get me killed. And so I'm doing this the wrong way. But have you started to notice, you said earlier that when we were on the way to training, you've had a lot of like tourist groups come out here, and like they'll come out and they want to shoot because it's like, it's part of the American culture. And it's so funny because the rest of the world's like, America doesn't have a culture. America's culture is like consumerism. But the more I get to know, thank you, I think that's good. The more I get to know sort of certainly more conservative Americans, which is I would say, more closely aligned with the Constitution and the constitutional rights and what this country was founded upon. Like, anyway, my question being, have you noticed an upswing in tourists coming out here and accommodating that kind of like American culture?
Yeah, so originally this park wasn't deemed to be open to the public, but things change and we adapt, right? So originally it was supposed to be more of a tourist attraction where people can make a stop between Vegas and LA and then experience, a little bit of America by slinging lead down range, right? It's nothing's more American than that, right? So, but COVID happened, travel stopped, and as a result, we had to make adjustments. And I think the local community's, happy that we did because we have all these facilities that we're now able to offer, so many of our guests. But yeah, in terms of tourism, because of the travel restrictions and whatnot, we don't see a whole lot nowadays. But eventually, we'll probably see that happening again. But the one thing that I do see is the increase in not your typical, picturesque American, so to speak. When people think American, sometimes they think, a white guy or a white family. But, I was telling you guys earlier, America doesn't have a color, right?
Right.
It's red, white, and blue. That's what it is, right? So regardless of, where you come from, we're all Americans, and I can talk to any one of my conservative friends, regardless of their race. They will back me 100% on this. Race does not matter to those that believe in the real America. So, but yeah, I see a lot of people from all walks of life. We have white people, we have Asian people, we have black people, we have Hispanics, people from the Middle East, from all sorts of places. Right. It's crazy because everyone wants to be a little, American in that regard, and there's no restrictions on it. So it's like this is, like you said, as about as American as you can get.
Yeah, and you got the flag here, and you can I feel more patriotic just even as a result of like the morning that we've spent here.
Definitely, like I feel your range has more of a culture. Than the other ones that I've been to. I'm not going to knock on any of them, but just it does feel like there's more of a culture, especially with the cowboy style range and the kind of the booths that you guys have and the people that do dress up.
Right.
Yeah, that's great culture.
That's a really good way of phrasing it as well. Okay, yeah, and you also touched on the next question that I had. So you mentioned the people come out here, and how is it similar to how people will do like Civil War reenactments? People will come out and do like almost like shooting, but with the cowboy vibe.
Yeah, so
which I think is so fucking cool.
Route 66 Shooting Sports Park is home to the Cajon Cowboys. They've been shooting for almost 3 decades. Even before we opened up as a range, they were here as a private club. So the Cajon Cowboys, they're a cowboy action, single action shooting society certified group. And the whole thing with cowboy action shooting is everything is very specific to the late 1800s up until maybe early 1900s or so. But it's basically during the expansion west, the Wild West, the frontier and stuff like that. So everyone's dressed up from head to toe in period correct garb, as well as the firearms that they're using are all period correct. So single action. So you're not going to see someone up there with a Glock 19 shooting that stage.
Yeah.
They're all going to be using they're all going to be using 1873 single action revolvers, stuff like that. It's all super cool, and they'll have all their leather gear, their holsters, their shell carriers, and all that.
So even the guns are dated back.
Yeah. So they use like lever action rifles and break breech shotguns and stuff like that. So everything's period correct. It's essentially a massive costume party or cosplay, but with guns and with an actual course of fire that they shoot at.
It's very, very serious cosplay.
It's a pretty purist environment.
You know what? It used to be, I would say, but nowadays, even with this club itself, like sometimes it's a very, very inviting group of people.
Okay.
The president of this club here, Ryan, or AKA Bear Trap. Everyone's got a nickname, by the way. You have to have a nickname.
Okay.
Oh.
I love it.
Yeah. So everyone,
Bear Trap.
no one goes by the real name. You don't go up and say, "Hey, Laura, can you come here?" It's, "Hey, shoot, I don't even know how to make one up." They're all like very, very, like Annie Oakley,
Yeah.
Do you take part?
You know what? That's one thing that I would really want to do, but I don't have the time or the money for. Because you have to get kitted up, and the guns all cost $1,000 a piece, plus all the leather work that you need to have done, plus everything.
Right.
Other than the boots, and that's about all I got. So.
But the boots are as important as the guns, it sounds like.
Yeah. Your costume and your attire does help immerse everyone into that. Honestly, when I'm out there, I'm walking around in my everyday casual wear. I feel out of place. I feel like everyone's looking at me sideways because I don't look like I'm from the 1800s, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it really transforms everything, and that's why we have those facades up there.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not shooting in like a modern environment. It kind of takes you back like a little time machine.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's really cool.
That's awesome.
It's so unique as well. Like, again, it's just not what me as a kind of bias as heck immigrant would think of when. Well, like we said when we started, like it's not what you'd think of as a firing range.
Right.
And it is. It makes it more inviting.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's wonderful.
Going back to the concealed carry. So
Okay.
I know you got your concealed carry here in Riverside County.
Right.
Obviously, I'm just asking a dumb question, but those rules will not apply to LA County.
So each county, the state the state law basically grants the head of either the county or your municipality, like at the city level, the power to grant permits based on their discretion. So as long as they establish two criteria, it's good cause as well as good moral character, right? So good cause could be your explanation of why you feel you need to have a concealed carry permit, right? Historically speaking, these two clauses were used to deny permits, right? So you can say, "Oh, I want this for self-protection because, my neighbor down the street, or someone at work, or I work in a rough environment, something like that." A lot of counties previously basically said, "Nope, that's not good enough," and just outright deny you. So it's a waste of time. But nowadays, we're kind of seeing, like I said, a swinging in the right direction, and we're seeing constitutional sheriffs that are now expanding their definition of good cause and whatnot. And then the good moral character thing is basically, as long as you're not a criminal to a certain degree, you're more than, welcome to apply for one, essentially. But in places like in more progressive counties, for example, LA, not quite there yet, but actually, I'm actually surprised because their sheriff, Villanueva, he's starting to, especially with all this talk of defunding, they actually had to close down various, not departments, but divisions and units because of this whole defunding thing. I'm actually seeing him kind of shift a little bit compared to previous sheriffs like Lee Baca, for example, who was outright corrupt. I think he got indicted by, for some federal charges and whatnot. I think he's been arrested and stuff like that. I forget. But that whole debacle with Lee Baca and his tenure as sheriff was your typical progressive LA, kind of thing. But you don't necessarily see that with the new sheriff there. He seems to be a little more for the people, but it's LA, it's political, so who knows how that's going to play out.
I know he was strong-armed into releasing an awful lot of people from prison, and again, like my British family would be like, "It's right, people shouldn't be in prison for like basic like drug offenses," and I completely agree. But the fact of the matter is that they've gone to prison, they now have the trauma of going to prison, they're being released out prematurely to nothing. Most of them end up on the street, and they have no means of dealing with, like, because you have to rehabilitate after prison.
Absolutely, yeah. That's one of the downfalls of our prison system is we don't equip inmates with the tools to be successful once they're reintroduced to society. There's no reintegration process. They're just kind of, here's the door, it's open, go ahead and good luck. And then they fall into the same old habits, and then that's why you get all these repeat offenders and whatnot. And it's kind of a downward spiral. So the criminal justice system, in that regard, it's a little bit broken, and it'd be great to see some change there, but I don't have the answers, and I don't know if anyone does. So that's kind of one of those
rabbit holes.
Yeah, just like homelessness. Like, we all know it's a problem, but how the hell do we solve it, right?
Yeah, I know. I'm still trying to figure it out, though. I'm gonna get an answer eventually. Right. But it seems like I actually kind of want to go back to Danny's question. So, because this is my complete Luddite. So you have the conceal and carry that was awarded to you in Riverside County. Could you conceal and carry your gun if you say went into LA for the evening? Yeah.
So So once you're permitted, it's good for the entire state, as well as any other state that accepts that permit for that given state. So it's called a reciprocity. So for most states, if I recognize your permit, you'll recognize mine. There's a little handshake going on there. In California, we don't recognize anyone's permits. So aside from a lot of those constitutional carry states, your permit's not really good there, which is why some other states have what's called non-resident concealed carry permits. So, for example, I have one through Arizona, which allows me access to or permission to carry in states like Nevada, Washington, Idaho, Utah, Florida, Texas, and more states. I believe it covers like 39 states or so.
All the fun states.
Yeah. But if you have your permit issued in California, it's recognized throughout the state. So unless you're going to a prohibitive or sterile environment, say like the airport or any federal building, including courthouses and even the post office, you're not supposed to be carrying in those places. Otherwise, you're able to carry basically throughout the entire state as long as it's permitted.
So as long as you drive there.
I mean, you can walk there too.
But you can't fly with it, even if you have a
You know what?
permit.
Flying with guns is not as daunting as most people think it is. A lot people fly with guns all the time. It's just here in the state, California, it's not as common just because we drive everywhere. So, but if you want to fly out to Texas with your guns, you just go through the process of checking and declaring a firearm with your airline of choice, and then they'll get it all secured and put away. And then at the end of it, at the other end of your trip, you just go and pick it up, and then. Yeah, so there's a process in place, and it's not necessarily impossible. The only issue is for some states, for example, I think New Jersey and New York, if you do fly into there with a firearm, you basically have police waiting for you at the gate. So
I can kind of understand that given what New York and New Jersey kind of went through. Yeah.
Right.
I can understand it from like that perspective. You want to like even people in New York, I'm sure, but it's still not, I don't know, like, oh gosh, it would be so much easier if we just focused on state laws and not federal laws.
Yeah.
But I had a knife actually taken off me at New York. Where do we fly out of? I think it was
LAX.
But when we flew out of New York
JFK.
last year, it was JFK. Yeah, they took my pen knife off me, and I'd literally just flown out of LA with it in like my pocket or something.
Oh.
Like you can leave LA with like an ounce of weed in your bag, and no one says a thing.
Yeah, and it's honestly not to knock any government agency, but airport security is more of a facade than it is security. So yeah, I've seen also, I've heard of so many different things getting passed, and that's only natural. People are human and we miss things, right? So it's not to speak ill of anyone, but it happens, and sometimes just like how did this get through? It's like, oh, whatever. It's here. And like so long as it's, I think like I think one of my friends who's a pilot, the way he said it was like, unless it's a bomb, we don't really give a shit. Right.
And that I thought was like, oh, okay, I understand now why I've been able to get away with all this shit for years.
Yeah, and for the most part, it's not so much like the pilots or the staff that's concerned. It's the other guests, right? Because people are inherently panicked and nervous for no obvious reason, because people can't deal with certain situations, and that's just how it is.
How do you find that people respond in California to you being so involved with firearms? Because I mean, to give an example, I spoke to 2 different neighbors yesterday. They both asked me what I was doing today. One's a progressive liberal, one's a doesn't really give a shit about politics
Okay.
person. The give a shit about politics person was just like, cool, what kind of guns is it? The progressive liberal was like, why?
Right.
And I was so like, oh, okay, I guess, it's diversity, guys.
Right.
But yeah, how do you find people typically respond out here?
You know what? Let's see. All of my friends basically know I'm into guns. I'm not very secretive about it. If you see my social media, it's pretty much out there. But I do have friends on both sides of the spectrum, and for the most part, the friends that are still friends with me that haven't unfriended me are respective of differing opinions. They might not ever budge from their viewpoints, but they at least accept the fact that I have my viewpoints and they have theirs, and that's how it should be. I'm not I don't believe anyone should ever be diversity of thought is extremely important, just more so than diversity of color, right? Because I think what really sets us apart necessarily isn't our skin color, but rather how we think, right? As individuals, think for yourself and whatnot. But yeah, the progressive liberal friends that I do have and that haven't blocked me or whatever yet, they at least respect my opinions and respect all of that. They might not like it, but they're accepting of it. And same thing, on the flip side of the coin, I might not, agree with their policies and their kind of way of thinking, but I respect it and I understand it, because ultimately the way I see politics is we all want the same thing for everyone, right? We want this country and our families and our children to be successful and to be able to thrive in this environment, in this society. But the only difference is our approach to it, right? So, liberals and progressives and the leftists, they have one way that they think will be, will attain that goal of being, the utopia that we all wish to have. And then the conservatives, the Republicans, and the right, they have a different idea of what that might look like. But at the same time, we all want to work towards something that's a better life for everyone, right? So it's the same goal, and like you guys were saying in a previous podcast, we're all on the same highway, we're just in different lanes, right? So
yeah, I mean, I always say this too, but for the most part we agree to disagree,
right?
And I think that's fair.
Yeah,
I know some people can get extreme and be like, no, you can't agree to that, but yeah, like I said, for the most part I think you can. Right.
I was going to ask Danny, do a lot of your friends have guns? I know that a lot of your friends have now slightly become a lot of my friends, but it's not something I even think about.
No. Only person I know that owns one is me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that's how I know you're from like LA, and not like, because out here in the Inland Empire in Riverside County, San Bernardino County, we're, like I was telling you guys, the more east you go from LA, the more, the redder it turns. It's kind of a gradient, right? You go from, blue, and then you kind of get a little bit of purple, and then you start leaning into more red. And then because I've been out here, the older I get, the more, the further east I find myself. I grew up in the San Gabriel Valley. I was born in Monterey Park, just like 95% of all the other Asian kids in Southern California. And as I grew up, I lived in Rolling Heights, Diamond Bar, Chino Hills, and then now Corona was where I'm at. So more and more towards the east, more and more towards the Inland Empire. And because of my interests and my viewpoint, it's a little more fitting to my lifestyle. I don't need to go out to downtown LA to hit a club or anything like that. I'd rather come out on the weekends to go hit the range.
Yeah.
Yeah. Same.
Yeah. Now as well.
I live in the wrong city, because I live basically on the border of downtown LA.
Okay.
And Koreatown.
Okay.
And yeah, in Koreatown, all you do is drink. Yeah.
Drink and eat.
Yeah. I don't do that. I'm sure you know. I don't really drink, and yeah, I used to, for a period, like I used to go to the range every weekend instead. Right. And I didn't have anyone to teach me, so I just try to practice on my own.
Right.
But yeah. Now I met you, Caleb.
I'd be happy to, give you guys even additional, like what we did today was very fundamentals. That's why we spent better half of the session just talking about safety, talking about fundamentals. And that's the approach I like to take when I do things, is because a lot of instructors, they're like, here's a gun, hold it this way, shoot it. Okay, good, you're done. right? Collect money, you're out of here, right?
Mm.
I'd rather have people understand what it is that they're doing and be able to diagnose and self-diagnose what they're doing wrong. So the only way they're able to do that is if they understand the concepts behind the things that we do, right? So my whole mindset isn't necessarily, this is how you do it, go ahead and do it. It's more, this is how you do it, and here's why, right? That way, as humans, we're afraid of the unknown, right? That's why for your first shot, you're a little anxious. You weren't exactly sure what to expect.
I literally screamed.
yeah, I think you did.
I got on camera too.
So as human beings, we're naturally afraid of the unknown. But so what I like to do is I like to build that knowledge up so that people are not, it's not so daunting, because now you understand the concepts behind it. You understand a little better. It takes that stress level down a little bit. It takes the anxiety out of it, and it allows people to be able to be more receptive to the actual material instead of being so strung out and stressed out about, a gun going off and all that.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to say, you did an amazing job at making it a very technical practice. So like when I fired guns in the past, when I used to be a Girl Scout, actually we just did we've always had co-ed scouts in the UK. So it was me and a group of boys basically.
Right.
And we were just using air rifles.
Yeah.
Like nothing, like I remember one of them went off by accident, like just on its own, and the whole I don't know, that it was wooden, like the main body of it just completely snapped in half. And so we were dealing with a lot of very old, very like falling apart guns. We were shooting indoors at cans in our like scout den, and it was horrible. It was absolutely terrible. Like we were getting trained by like what was quite clearly a corrupt ex-cop, and there was nothing technical about it. It was just like, we're going to do this because it's something to do for the next 2 hours.
Right.
And the way that you approached it was far more like, it was not only a learning activity, but it's like, oh, I can take this and I can apply it and use it in the future. And like, I feel safer and more in control of this situation. Like, I think, and you also took, I guess, indirectly, then that takes a lot of the nervous out of it.
Oh yeah. Knowledge is power.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, I mean, what Caleb taught was the foundations, right? And even for me, like, I can honestly say I was never personally taught the foundation, so I had to come into this instruction today with an open mind. Like, I'm completely new, like I've never shot a gun before, and still learn something, for sure. And I think the way you teach is the way everyone should teach.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think, like, because it shows you're not in it for the money.
Right.
You're in it for first our experience, and then how, like you said, how we can apply it to our lives. Right. Yeah.
And I think what's interesting about that is it also aligns with you and your ideals. And like, we've talked about politics a little bit. We've talked about it a lot off camera, because I think we have a lot in common.
Right.
And it's interesting because, the one thing I always go back to with my British family and with, sort of my more like left-leaning friends out here, when they're like, oh, well, like guns kill people. It's no, actually, like, extreme situations and mental health disorders kill people.
Right.
The gun is just the tool that's used to enact it. Like, the person was always going to die. Trust me, I'm from the UK. Like, we don't have guns. The person still always dies.
It still happens.
Yeah. And what I think people really ignore is the fact that, okay, America might be a very young country, but that doesn't negate the fact that it is built on a really solid foundation.
Absolutely.
Like, the Constitution is and should be, like, you've just got to accept it. If you don't want to accept it, if you don't want to live under this Constitution, if you don't want the Second Amendment, Canada is right there.
Right.
Like, you can drive for a day and a half and you're in Canada, and you'll never have to deal with this again. And I think it's, at least for me, maybe I'm biased, maybe, like, coming into this and this literally being my first real introduction to guns, and I feel like I've had like the best one possible.
Yeah, I would say this was a great beginner's intro for you. Took all the stigma out of it as well. Yeah,
and like, it builds community in that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that I find
makes me want to come back.
Yeah. Oh, we'll definitely be back. Yeah, for sure.
I had a question. So I know you're here now. What's your plan here and for your business? And
So I want to continue, my ultimate goal is to be an advocate for the Second Amendment, because I feel like the Second Amendment is by far one of the most important pieces of the puzzle that is the Constitution, right? It's not a very complicated puzzle, but people kind of, for some reason, have a hard time understanding certain things. Shall not be infringed is pretty cut and dry, right? Yeah. Especially when you're putting it in historical context, right? And if you have any reading comprehension, you read the Second Amendment, what is it? A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, right? Mm-hmm. So it's very cut and dry. If you look at the commas, if you look at the punctuation, if you look at the context of which it was written, it's pretty cut and dry, right? Mm-hmm. And that just goes to show that no one knows anything about history nowadays. So, but where I want to take this is I want to continue to become an advocate to the shooting community as well as the Second Amendment. Mm-hmm. This facility we have so much potential here. Mm-hmm. Like I said, we're sitting on 90 acres of property. We're using about 12 right now. Right. So we have a lot of room to grow and a lot to offer. And, the more we can, bring new shooters in and make them feel safe and feel comfortable, the more they'll come back and then bring their friends and bring new shooters, bring more people into it. So it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy where, as long as we create a environment that's friendly and hospitable, we continue to have more shooters come in and bring new friends and, bring new people into the fold to practice their Second Amendment rights and whatnot. And then eventually get over the hurdles that kind of the barriers that are put in place, fear and, all of that. We want to try to eliminate that by having a very friendly environment. And that's the one thing that I would say we strive towards compared to other shooting ranges, so to speak. We're not your, although we employ a good bit of vets, we're not, the crusty old guy that's burned out, and is just miserable. We don't have that type of mentality here. We're very welcoming. Our key kind of one of our key tenets of what we do when we operate here, besides safety, second only to safety, is hospitality. Right? We like to offer this as a hospitality oriented business. So we're here to serve. We're not here to necessarily yell at people, right? We're here to, we help people staple up targets, we help people move things around, we make sure that everyone's being safe, and that's something that not a lot of people are used to. And as a result, Danny, you've been to other shooting ranges. I'm not going to name any specific
for sure, but
just in general speaking, we have your standard range officer, which is this crusty guy wearing an NRA hat that's going to be yelling at people. Right? That's your ideal kind of picturesque range officer, so to speak. We don't have that here, and we hope to never get to that point. So we would like to create an inviting environment for all of our guests.
Yeah, I've definitely had some bad experiences. I've seen, range officers that were yelling. I personally recently, when I went in the valley on the other side, it was just me checking. I just got there and I was just checking, how long was it wait? And off the bat, it's like, I don't know, just wait. And just kind of rude, right? And I was just, it was my first question. I never saw the guy before.
Right.
And it was, an experience like that. And I found out it was only one person ahead of me.
Oh. Jesus Christ.
And he was the first person there. So it's pretty ridiculous, but I get what you're saying.
we have a lot of people that have been to other ranges and whatnot, so they come to our range with their guard up. They're kind of like, I'm about to get chewed out right now, and so they come over here. But then, you met the staff up front, super friendly, super bubbly people, the happiest people in the world.
Everyone waves at everyone. Yeah. It's so nice. Like, we're driving around and everyone was waving. It was so lovely. And like, coming from LA, where like, okay, maybe 2 years ago I could walk around Venice and people would nod and say hello. Or 3 years ago. That doesn't happen now. People don't even look each other in the eye anymore.
They're buried in their phones and walking around.
Yeah. We were walking around like a week ago and walking around for a few miles. And she was like, I'm going to try to get a wave out of somebody. We maybe ran into like 10 people not one.
Yeah.
I think one towards the end.
The one girl right at the very end, and I think it's because I like was just like hi, like right in her face, and she was like hello, and I was like I got one. That's so fun. I forgot about that. Oh God, yeah. But no, everyone here seems super duper friendly. And did you know a lot of the people before you came to work here?
You know what? No, I didn't really. I was actually brought in here through one of my friends. He introduced us to the range here, and then we met some of the staff here, and then we started kind of thinking about what this place could be. And so myself and one of my other friends, Chris, who's actually part of the hockey team that Ian and I were where Ian was on, that we are still in. I know him through that, as well as kind of the local off-road community, which we touched upon. He owns a garage, Jimahaja Garage, or JH Garage, out in La Habra. He runs it with his fiance, and they are kind of an integral part to kind of the overland camping, outdoorsy, off-road community that we have here in Southern California.
Right.
And he's all about it. We share so many common interests, so we're eye to eye on basically everything. So it works out. We have a really good system. We kind of bounce ideas off of each other, and then we kind of make things work. So it's a really he's one of my best friends. I've only known him for 3 years, but just because we have so much in common, it's a really organic relationship.
That's good. I think those are the best type of relationships.
Absolutely.
And I think definitely with the experience that you provide, I feel like I could make a lot of good friends here as well.
Oh yeah.
And you mentioned earlier, like some people, even for me, like whenever I go to the range, I go with my guard up.
Yeah.
In a way, because I'm afraid like I'm just gonna do something wrong, even though I'm just asking a question. Right. I mean, I don't know. I'm not in that world, so I can't say, but I do go in with my guard up. But here, I mean, as soon as we came in, you greeted us. You gave your hand out first, and you were very polite. And it's a very different experience. Yeah,
and that's what we strive for. Everything that we do here is we're here to serve. Secondary only to making sure that everyone's being safe, because we're inherently in a dangerous place. I was telling you guys, most people don't seek training, and people don't really know the rules. So. Right. With every single person, or every single guest that we bring up here, we make sure we give them a safety brief, right? It's a few minutes, but we got to make sure everyone knows the basic safety rules, and they follow our range rules as well. That way, nobody gets hurt. So, that's just one thing that kind of we really, really stress, because safety is so paramount. The last thing we want is a situation to happen where it's going to not only affect the business, right, and the range itself, but also the Second Amendment community, right? It's going to be one more piece that, anti-gun legislators will be like, oh, see, this is so unsafe and this and that, and it's just something that we strive to create a safe environment that people can shoot and enjoy their time responsibly.
Have you guys had any incidents here?
No, not really. It's for the most part minor stuff. They cut their hand on, operating a firearm and whatnot. And some because we do allow steel targets here. Sometimes bullet fragments will come back, like not the full bullet itself, but like little pieces and parts might nick you and cut you up a little bit, but nothing, life-threatening or anything like that. And we hope to maintain that.
Yeah,
and part of our goal is to maintain that level of safety and service, so that we never have that situation happen.
Right. Yeah.
And do you find that a lot of the people that come here are more inclined towards that kind of like off-roader community? Because I feel like we're probably a part of the off-roader community we haven't really realized yet. Like, I feel like if there were a demographic...
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, like I don't have anybody around me that does what I do, but I mean, I do enjoy the occasional... I would say more of an overlanding versus an off-road. I mean, we did go crazy in the dunes in Utah and go high speed, like 80 miles through narrow. Yeah,
and you got the right vehicle for that type of stuff.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, if there was definitely a community for me, I would have modded my car a lot more.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the other thing that I'm kind of into. What I found is people with a certain mindset will fall into certain habits and lifestyles. Like, for example, for me, I'm a huge individualist. I feel like everyone is responsible for their own actions. Everything that happens to you because of your own choices, right? And with that in mind, I focus a lot on self-reliance, right? Because at the end of the day, besides family and even sometimes the only person you can depend on is yourself, right? So what I found with not only the shooting community, which, people take their own safety and their own protection into their own hands, but also within like the camping, overlanding community, the off-road community, it's all about self-reliant transportation and then self-reliant, sustainability of your camp and whatnot. You're going out to the middle of nowhere that has no power, no cell reception, no running water, no toilets, right? You're digging a hole and doing your business there, so, and then you have to have food for yourself, be able to pack everything into a compact vehicle, well, so to speak, compact, and travel in rough terrain. So all of that's like super it's super interesting because all of that is just you, right? You're not relying on any type of infrastructure at that point. It's all just primitive, self-reliant camping that you just do by yourself or with a group of friends and whatnot. And typically, I go with a group of friends just so we can have a little bit of company out there. I don't like having 20 people out there, but 5, 6, 7. It's always nice to get away a little bit.
Yeah,
that sounds fun.
It would be, that's kind of how I was raised. Like me, my mum, my dad, we'd like pack up the van and just fuck off and follow the sun, and didn't really have much money, so we can't go to like glamping spots. Well, they didn't exist in Europe up until about 5 years ago anyway. But there's something to be said for that sense of autonomy, and I definitely got a whole new whoosh of that today. Even with like, even if I'd hit the target, I think just the first time, that would have been like slightly enough for me to be like, oh, I feel actually more confident in myself. Like, it's a weird kind of rush that comes over when you realize that you can like actually handle a gun. Like, it sounds stupid, but like, I'm a girl, and it's the kind of thing, especially living in Los Angeles and how unfriendly people are these days, like just knowing that that's a skill to have, knowing that you can go out into the wild and survive it. I mean, that I almost feel is like truly American in many ways. And
I mean, as Americans, we're a nation of pioneers, right? For the most part, we had the Mayflower come over, the whole Christopher Columbus thing, and then all the 13 colonies, and then expansion all the way over to basically as far west as you can go. That's very American, to be able to venture out, to explore, to discover, and not only that, but to be reliant on yourself. It's really, and that's why I love history so much, and I love the fact that we're in this historical spot where people have come through here with nothing but horses and carriages, right? It's like the Oregon Trail, except you don't die of dysentery. The other thing is also what I've kind of come to find out is with this whole overlanding thing, like, you don't necessarily have an established group of people that are into guns necessarily. I find that some people don't even like guns or whatever, but then as they kind of venture out into the wilderness, they start to realize, oh, there's bears here, there's mountain lions, there's two-legged predators, people doing nefarious things out in the middle of nowhere,
Especially here in California.
Right, exactly. So being able to go out there and experience these things, then you have people thinking, maybe I need to get a gun to protect myself when I'm out there in the wilderness. I actually have a friend, young kid, just turned 23, very, involved in building his own truck out and doing all that. And I remember seeing him comment on something on a Facebook page, one of the overlanding Facebook pages a while back, like, oh, why do you need a gun? Blah, 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 right? But then as he matured a little bit, got a little more life experience, he all of a sudden, he's talking to me about getting a gun, and then like I'm seeing kind of his viewpoints kind of shift a little bit. It's pretty interesting to see. So that's just one thing. Self-reliance, protection is your own responsibility at that point, and I think a lot of people are starting to realize that the more mainstream, I would say, the whole overlanding thing is getting. Nowadays, every other car you're going to see is going to be a built-up Toyota Tacoma or 4Runner or Jeep or Gladiator or whatever. So it's a growing trend, and people are rediscovering the outdoors, which is kind of a good thing and a bad thing, because the conservation of our natural resources, the more traveled roads get, the more worn down they get. So there's a huge responsibility to us as travelers, as off-roaders, overlanders, whatever you want to call us, to be able to maintain a certain respect for the land that we're using, right? We always say tread lightly, pack it in, pack it out. I even go as far as taking more home than you brought in with you, right? So if you see any trash, you already have trash bags, pick them up, right?
Yep.
And that, for the most part, that's kind of ingrained within this community as well. So it's always a plus to have. But then you have, like in any respect, in any discipline, in anything that you do in life, you're gonna have bad apples of the bunch that just disregard that, and then that kind of ruins it for everyone as well. So, and the problem with the growing trend of this is, unfortunately, the law of averages, numbers and stuff, whatever, you're just going to get more of those, people that aren't necessarily, shepherds of this type of lifestyle that we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, I think the way that we were told...
Yeah, sorry, there's a lot of ambient noise here.
No, it's okay.
It's okay. No, I was going to say the way that we were taught it when I was in the Scouts, and then I did my Duke of Edinburgh's Award, which is a whole other thing, was, you leave nothing but footprints, take nothing but photographs, which is like a kind of like flowery way of being like, don't be a cunt to the environment.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like respect it. And I think that it's also in a state like California, where we live in such a delicate environment. Like, we've manipulated the landscape of this state so much, like even just through the way that we've like managed water courses and catchment areas. Like, it's so easy. You leave like one little fire like kind of lit slightly for 2 minutes too long, and then half the state's up.
Yep.
It's delicate. But do you find that within the kind of like growing community, people are looking for that type of escapism where they want to get away from the grid, they want to get away from the city life?
Yeah, I do see that a lot. It's just, for example, when I first bought my truck, it was difficult to find a four-wheel drive vehicle here in Southern California because, for the most part, they send four-wheel drive vehicles to places that would actually need four-wheel drive. Places that have snow, places that have a lot of mountains and whatnot. So down here, with our geography, we typically don't require four-wheel drive. Right. So four-wheel drive is actually a premium down here.
Oh, wow.
Up until very recently, I would say. Nowadays, you can go to a lot, and then there's going to be, a third of them are four-wheel drive, or even half of them are four-wheel drive. That wasn't the case, 5 years ago, right? So it's I think the market share is shifting as well, and the manufacturers are starting to see that as well. That's why we're getting the introduction of new reintroduced platforms. So, for example, like the Ford Bronco, and got the whole Jeep Gladiator, the Tesla truck, even the Cybertruck. So there's all these little things that manufacturers are starting to realize that, hey, this is a growing trend right now that people are really into, to get out there to experience nature in a self-reliant way. So then it's really boomed in the last a few years. For sure.
That's so great. That's so inspiring. We should actually go and use my tent at some point.
Yeah, totally. Sure.
I was gonna say.
Do you have one of those? I haven't seen on your truck, but the ones where the tent, I think it's like by
rooftop
iCamper, or CVT, they have the rooftop.
So I don't currently have a rooftop tent, just because I like the traditional profile of a pickup truck, just because for me a pickup truck is also very American to have, Right. But at the same time, I've throughout my experiences here within the overland off-road community, I'm starting to see a need for that now, just because, you guys saw the bed of my truck. That thing's filled to the brim, right? I have to keep it open to get your guys' stuff in there. So I'm probably going to be picking up like a rack soon, and then if I all of a sudden have that platform, guess what's going to go on top of it? Probably a rooftop tent.
Right.
So, but it's really cool to see the growing competition within that space, because everyone's trying to get one nowadays. So there's going to be more people introducing new products into the market, and then as a result, prices will be coming down a little bit. So free market capitalism, right? It seems to work.
It does. It really does. Do you see a similar trend happening with guns as more people get more into it? Are there more options? Are there more, like, 'cause I don't know anything about the actual manufacturing of guns.
So firearms for the most part, the technology is very, very simple, and it's been the same for the last 200 years or so. The thing that is unique about California is we have this stupid thing called an assault weapons ban and another stupid thing called the safe handgun roster, which is a completely arbitrary BS made up,
What is
nonsensical thing. It basically is a list of requirements that a firearm has to pass after testing to be able to be deemed safe by the Department of Justice, and it includes common things like drop testing, and then it has to have this or that features like a magazine disconnect, which means if the magazine's removed from the firearm, the firing mechanism doesn't engage. In addition to that, the biggest hurdle right now for 99.999% of gun manufacturers is the micro-stamping requirement. So micro-stamping is a unproven technology which basically imprints a micro-stamp, either a serial number or some kind of identifying mark on the spent casing of a cartridge. Typically speaking, it would be like a little engraving on your firing pin. So if it hits a primer, after it detonates, it imprints a little thing on there, so then can be used for tracking purposes or whatever. Politicians watch too much CSI apparently, and it's all made up, just like half the things in Hollywood. But
I was gonna say,
that presents some unique challenges for California, because now we're limited to, instead of the thousands and thousands of guns available on the open market, we're limited to hundreds.
Right.
And it's very, very limited. Like, for example, Danny, your Glock 17 is a Gen 3. It's rostered. But if you wanted to buy the newest Glock 17, you can't.
Yeah.
It's a Gen 5. It's the only difference is there's very, very slight cosmetic differences, as well as very, very slight internal modifications, upgrades. But because it doesn't... The Glocks are grandfathered in, right? As long as they continue to pay the state I think it's only $100 a year to recertify. They're kind of grandfathered in, but the state is making it more and more difficult to add new guns. It's basically impossible at this point, but recently they took out the stipulation. Previously was 2 points of contact for the micro-stamping, so now they changed it to 1 point of contact, which the technology still doesn't really exist. But if you do add a firearm that fits that safety requirement, they'll take 3 off of that list. I don't know what the criteria is. It might just be arbitrary, but it doesn't make any sense why you would take one and put one up and take 3 down. Like, I'm not a mathematician, but that's not a winning proposition for us whatsoever. So in California, our options are limited. So then, as a result, our prices for handguns are artificially inflated. We typically pay perhaps up to $200 more for a basic Glock 17 Gen 3, right? Versus if you go to any other free state, you can get the latest and greatest, Glock 17 for about $450, maybe
over
less.
Over here, it's six
to 700,
yeah, 670. Yeah.
So we don't necessarily have that free market as far as guns go because of government intervention. So that's kind of the thing that stifles the whole concept of free market capitalism, is government intervention. Anything that the government touches and introduces rules to, all of a sudden we have a situation where it's not very it doesn't work how it's supposed to.
Right. Yeah. We also have magazine capacity limits as well.
Right.
I think was it last year or the year before? I know.
Yeah.
For ARs, you were able to have 30 rounds, and now you can only have 10.
So that is a very, very unique situation. So like I was telling you guys earlier, there's a lot of pending legislation right now as it relates to gun laws, especially here in California. So what you're referring to is, there's so many nowadays. I believe it's not Miller. Miller's assault weapons ban. Duncan v. Becerra. So Javier Becerra is the Attorney General of the state of California. So he's named on the lawsuit. Essentially, it's a lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of California's magazine capacity limit. So it's technically speaking, we're limited to as it states in the law, we're limited to 10 rounds and no more than 10 rounds for magazines. So we cannot acquire new magazines that have that are beyond 10 rounds. So it's not currently illegal to possess because of a injunction that's been placed as a result of the lawsuit, but they did recently try to pass legislation to say, hey, all of the stuff that you had from 20 years ago, now it's illegal. And then they didn't even offer any type of, buyback program or compensation. So, hello, Constitution, unreasonable search and seizure. You can't do that, you know. So that was a very easy challenge. And within the Californian gun community right now, there's a district circuit judge, his district court. Yeah. His name's Roger Benitez. So we call him State Benitez because of how great he is for us. But he's a man of the people. He's a very staunch constitutionalist, apparently. And as a result of that lawsuit, he filed a preliminary injunction, essentially barring the state from enforcing their unconstitutional ban on high-capacity magazines.
Oh, wow.
Right? So that happened, and of course, with the appeals process, the Attorney General was able to file for a stay of that injunction, right? Which he eventually granted, but he took his time. So, and he also, as a part of that stay order, he did stipulate that anyone that purchased high-capacity magazines, that's their term, the state's term, high capacity, even
So
though it's
over 10.
Yeah, over 10. Anyone that acquired it between that period where that injunction was in place is legally allowed to continue to keep it just as if it was the status quo previously, prior to the introduction of the I think section C of that code. I think it's 23.210 or something like that. There's some penal code essentially that's that stipulates that even possession is illegal. So that part is still enjoined from enforcement. So anyone that still currently has high capacity magazines acquired legally, either previously or as a result of what we call it Freedom Week, we're still good to go. Yeah.
So I'm going to ask another really stupid question. So the handgun that I was shooting today,
Right.
so that had 15 rounds in it, I think.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's a Glock 19, and the Glock 19 from the factory comes with a 15-round magazine. And as a because I did acquire quite a bit of magazines during Freedom Week, just because, hey, a little taste of freedom.
Yeah.
A little taste of freedom. You just kind of drink it from a fire hose. So I bought quite a bit of new magazines to supplement my existing supply of magazines that I acquired prior to the whole they're grandfathered in, right? So I did replenish my supply, and as a result, of Judge Benitez's decision and his his injunction and his stay, I'm able to legally keep these magazines. I cannot make them available for sale to anyone here, and I can't additionally get more high capacity magazines. But all the stuff that I have from Freedom Week and prior to that is all good to go.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's a lot of laws for California.
Yeah.
You almost have to be a lawyer to own guns in California because the laws are changing on a
you gotta
every
follow.
Year. Yeah, every year it's changing.
I remember I was trying to purchase a SIG P320.
Yeah,
you can't.
You can't.
Only law enforcement. Is that because I think that has a capacity of 17?
No, so the SIG
remember.
320 is a relatively new pistol. Manufacturers are still coming out with new guns, but we don't necessarily get to see them here in California because of the safe handgun roster, right? Because the SIG P320 is not listed on that roster, it's not available for your run-of-the-mill civilian to go out and buy because we're somehow less than law enforcement, something to that effect. I don't know. There's an exemption for law enforcement, so law enforcement can legally purchase these without having to deal with the roster. So that's one of the 2 or 3 ways that you're able to get off roster, which we call these guns that don't appear on the safe handgun roster. That's one of the ways to acquire off roster handguns is if, for example, a police officer buys a off-roster handgun and decides, after a little bit, I don't really like this thing. It doesn't fit my style. I don't like how it shoots, whatever the case might be. And they decide, okay, I'm going to sell it. So private party transfers are exempt from kind of that whole clause.
Yeah.
So if you want to purchase an off-roster handgun, you're able to do so if you buy it from someone that has it legally, aka a law enforcement officer.
Right.
So, and then once that's once that's kind of in this, in the free market, if I wanted to sell you my Glock 19 Gen 5, I could do that too, right? So it's just the only problem is now, because they're in such short supply, because there's how many million residents in California and how many police officers, right? That disparity inflates the prices for these off-roster handguns. So you can easily see these off-roster handguns go for double of their typical price.
Right.
So the other way is intrafamiliar transfer from out of state, and it gets, like I said, you have to be a lawyer to navigate these gun
I
laws.
was gonna say, they seem to make it so overcomplicated.
Very much so.
But I think it's incredible that, certainly, at least for me, this is my first real experience of guns, and I feel like you are so all encompassing in terms of like your knowledge of not only the actual tool itself, but the law, the lifestyle, the culture, the constitution, the history. I mean, you should have your own podcast where you just talk about, it's brilliant, honestly.
Honestly, I could spend, hours. I know we've been talking for a couple hours at this point in time. I don't know how it's going to be edited out, but
it's all raw.
Yeah, just raw.
Right on. So, but in either case, there's just so much to talk about. Even just explaining to you guys the basic fundamentals. I mean, that took us an hour, and that was light speed, because you guys caught him really quickly. That was light speed. But in general, it just there's just so much to talk about, especially here in California, when we're dealing with so much BS and so much bureaucracy and so many limitations and so many lawsuits, and the law's constantly changing. They're always passing new things, trying to pack it in with some other bill and call it, the Child Safety Act, but really it does nothing to improve child safety, but rather strips rights of law-abiding citizens. So, like I said, I'm a staunch constitutionalist, and I'm a huge proponent for the Second Amendment. I think I told you guys this previously, but I bought my first handgun at the age of 21 before I bought my first legal alcoholic beverage. Right. That's just I've always been interested in guns, and I don't know if it's because of my background growing up and just having that kind of that self-reliance kind of part kind of instilled in me from a young age, but maybe that's part of it. But in either case, I was just always interested in guns, interested in being able to utilize this tool to not only protect myself, but to be able to now spread that knowledge to people like you, people like our 65-year-old grandma learning to shoot her stump notes for the first time in 30 years. So I live for it.
Well, I mean, we would definitely love to have you back on in the future, maybe together with Ian.
That'd be so much fun.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
No, thanks for having me.
What can we plug for you before we wrap up here? Tell us everything. Tell us how we can find you, where online, where to call, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So first things first, we're sitting here at Route 66 Shooting Sports Park. We're located at 15810 Cajon Boulevard in San Bernardino, California, 92407. Sorry, I'm still kind of new to this. You can visit our website at r66ssp.com. And that's going to be kind of the range itself. Where you can also find us on Instagram at r66ssp. So first things first, get the range covered, get out here, get to shooting, meet our staff, meet our team. Would be happy to have any of your guests. And on top of that, my personal stuff, you can always book a training session with me at adapt-training.com. The name is really indicative of kind of my approach to things, just adapting and kind of going with the flow. That's how I've been living my life, and that's how I like to teach. And my personal, at Caleb Wu, at CALEBWU. Feel free to follow me and my little shenanigans and stuff. Like you guys have both seen, it's just mostly dogs, trucks, fishing, shooting, and that's my life.
That's the shit that I love. So.
Yeah, that sounds like a dream come true, man. Literally living the American dream.
Oh yeah. I live for that.
That's awesome.
Caleb, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you guys so much.
The best. Yeah. Cool.
We'll see you soon.
Yeah.
Cool.